Hi everyone, James here. Welcome to another video. This is going to be a kind of a bit of a shout-outs video, really, mentioning some channels that I haven't given shout-outs to before, and also mainly showing some records and CDs that have been recommended on the VC, things that I've checked out and listened to and liked. I don't do this a great deal. I mean, I don't make videos about it a lot, which is a shame because I actually do. I'm kind of always checking out things that people talk about on their videos, and it's quite funny because normally what I will do is if somebody does a very strong recommendation of an album, I don't go onto Spotify, I don't YouTube it or anything, I don't check it out first. I just literally just go and buy it straight away. If it's completely unheard, I normally go with a CD, just purely because it's cheaper, you know, it's less of a gamble. But occasionally I'll kind of, you know, go for the record too, because, you know, I don't like this thing where you go onto Spotify and you listen to something for about 5 minutes and then you make a judgment based on whether or not you're ever going to hear that music again, you know, because often it takes a while to get into stuff. So I'd rather kind of take a gamble. If it's, you know, not too expensive, you can always, you know, send things back or trade them or whatever. So I'd rather just, if somebody really convinces me just by how much they've enthused about something, I'd rather just get it and then, you know, see how I feel about it myself. So sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. You know, you like some things, you don't like other things. So I've got a fair few things to get through, so I'll do the vinyl first and then I'll do the CDs. Okay, so this first one, this was recommended by the wonderful Richard Riley on the VC, who shows a great variety of music. Kind of old jazz and blues is his kind of speciality, but he makes a virtue out of always checking out new things. He showed this. This is the Blue Pills, who are a kind of Swedish progressive heavy rock blues band. They sound a bit Sabbathy, a bit Zeppelin-y, but with this Janis Joplin style singer. A double album, puts hairs on your chest, as my dad would have said. I just saw that on Richard's channel. I just thought the cover looked fantastic. I thought that's one to check out on vinyl rather than CD. So thank you very much, Richard, for that recommendation. That's the Blues Pills. Vinyl Richie showed this album and talked about it. This is the Birds, their untitled album. I think it's their 10th album, I could be wrong. It contains a mixture of live material and studio tracks as well. Side 2 is just one track. It's a kind of live version of 8 Miles High, which is kind of fairly spectacular, really. It's very kind of slow building, but there's some great stuff on that. So that's Untitled by the Birds. Thank you to Vinyl Richie for that recommendation. Okay, so this next one, the first proper channel shout out, because the previous two people I've mentioned have been on the VC for a while. Let's get this in shot. Okay, this is Prince and Artificial Age, and I saw this on the channel of Mitch Wood, who hasn't been on the VC very long. He hasn't made a great many videos, but the ones he's done are really, really excellent. He showed his complete Prince collection, which is where I saw this. He's shown a lot of Zappa records. He's been working his way through showing his father's collection of music. His father sadly passed away a while ago, and Mitch is talking about his father's collection. He's talked about the guitarist Ian Moore and a few other artists as well. Really interesting channel. Mitch is very personable. He just, you know, he's quite chilled. He sits there, he talks about music, he shows things. Just a really nice channel. I would never have picked out this album by Prince. I've been buying the Prince stuff on CD because I kind of missed out on Prince back in the day for some reason. Long story. But in the last maybe 3 or 4 years, I've been checking out Prince's classic 80s albums on CD. This is a kind of later one, and it's not one that I would have been in any hurry to get to. But it's a really great album. John Downing, Sitchin's pianist, also recommended this to me as well. Yeah, it's got some fantastic tracks on it. Very kind of futuristic sounding, kind of R&B, quite Sly Stone-ish. Really good. So yeah, check out Mitch Wood. I'll put the link down below, and thanks Mitch for that recommendation. Check out Mitch's Prince video. I think he made 2 videos actually going through all his collection. Really good stuff. And finally, for the vinyl, Shannon D in fact, she's also doing a sort of similar thing where she shows records that belong to her parents. Her parents have given her the records, they don't want them anymore, and she's working her way through them, listening to them. Great idea for a series. She showed this one, Loggins and Messina, on stage. Since I joined the BC, I've heard a lot about these guys. I know Vinyl Richie really likes them, but I'd never really listened to them to any great degree. Now, when Shannon showed this, she talked about the track Angry Eyes, and I went onto YouTube and listened to it, and I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. It's got a lot of jamming on it, a lot of really great guitars and vocal interplay and everything. And this album has some really stunning ensemble performances, just a great live set, really. Found it in good condition on eBay. I think it was only about £10. So I took a punt on that, and very great it is too. So thank you to Shannon D for that recommendation. Okay, so those of a nervous disposition who do not like CDs may tune out now. And let's get down to the CDs. So the first two were recommendations by Brian, Shamrocking Records. If you haven't checked out Brian yet, I urge you to do so. One of the friendliest, kind of nicest people on the VC. He kind of radiates warmth. His channel reminds me of... It strikes me as one of those channels that will just grow and grow, you know, and if you were to tune in kind of maybe 5 years down the line, you know, you'll probably have about 10,000 subs, you know. But he's got a very, very wide taste in music, and he shows things that I've never heard of, but he's also tuned into things that I really like as well, you know, certain classic rock. He loves Van Morrison, and he loves certain kinds of heavy metal, you know, from back in the day. But he shows a lot of really interesting music that I've never heard of. Now, one of the albums that he raved about was this one. This is the David Wax Museum and Knock Knock Get Up. The David Wax Museum blend kind of Mexican influences with more of a kind of straight Americana kind of sound. They have really interesting instruments kind of, you know, blended into the mix. There's a fiddler, there's an instrument that I can't actually pronounce. It's spelled Q-U-I-J-A-D-A, Quijada, a percussion instrument made from a donkey's jawbone. It's better than it sounds. It's very kind of tuneful, upbeat stuff, very atmospheric, really, really nicely written songs, really well performed. I really enjoyed it. It's fronted by David Wax, the band, and he became interested in Mexican folk music after attending Deep Springs College and Harvard University. And the album focuses on different styles of son music, son, S-O-N, which is a Mexican form of music, I believe. Great album. I highly recommend both it and Brian's channel as well. So that's the David Wax Museum. And the other album that Brian recommended, and he said this is his favourite band of all time. I'd never heard of them. I checked them out online, and sure enough, they've got this kind of big long history. This is Toad the Wet Sprocket and their album Dulcinea. An American alternative rock band formed in 1986. Really interesting story as to how they got their name. Eric Idle had written a sketch in which he kind of tried to come up with the most ridiculous sounding band name of all time. He said, I once wrote a sketch about rock musicians, and I was trying to think of a name that would be so silly nobody would ever use it or dream it could ever be used. So I wrote the words Toad the Wet Sprocket, and a few years later I was driving along the freeway in LA, and a song came on the radio, and the DJ said that was by Toad the Wet Sprocket, and I nearly drove off the freeway. This is good, actually. I know Brian's a fan of REM, which I'm not, but it does remind me of REM, but it's, to me anyway, it's less annoying than REM. The singer doesn't have anything like as annoying a voice. In fact, it's not annoying at all. They are very melodic. They write some really good, intelligent, tuneful, slightly quirky sort of pop rock songs, quite kind of left of field, but not massively left of field. There's a kind of mainstream thing stirred into the mix as well. I kind of heard kind of echoes of Squeeze in there as well. But yeah, a really good album. Love the band name. Not the kind of thing I would ever have picked up had I not heard somebody like Brian raving about it. So that's Toad the Wet Sprocket, and I hope I am pronouncing the album title correctly. Dulcinea. Well worth checking out. Thanks, Brian. Okay, moving on. So the next channel I want to talk about briefly is Matthew Street, who I kind of hooked up with because of my other channel. I have a Beatles channel as well called Beatle James, and Matthew is one of the kind of little regular people in that kind of group of Beatles fans who make Beatles videos. But he's into much more than just the Beatles. He's into power pop. That's his main thing. Great guy, lovely chap. Shows some really interesting things and talks about them, you know, and kind of enthuses about them. The two things that he turned me on to, well, I knew about one of them anyway, but I was very late coming to it, and that is the album I Am the Cosmos by Chris Bell from Big Star. I've been into Big Star for a long time. I knew that Chris Bell had made one of these kind of legendary solo albums, but I just never got around to checking it out. So thanks to Matthew for that one. That is a tremendous album. And I was quite surprised because I always assumed, listening to Big Star, I always assumed that the kind of the sound of the band was defined by Alex Chilton. But in fact, this sounds like a Big Star album, whereas some of the Alex Chilton stuff I've heard actually sounds less Big Star-y. So presumably it was Chris Bell who set a lot of the stylistic parameters for Big Star. Very big sound, cavernous drums, kind of Birds harmonies, quite Beatlesy, quite Beach Boysy, really good songs. This album has a very religious feel to it. Apparently he was going through a period, I mean, he didn't have a very good time after he left Big Star. You know, Big Star didn't happen really, you know, at the time commercially, and I think Chris went on a bit of a downward spiral, and he made this album while in the throes of some sort of, you know, religious experience, but he was also struggling with depression and drug and alcohol problems. He became deeply immersed in Christianity, and the lyrics of this album kind of reflect that kind of spiritual searching that he was on at the time. Great album, really amazing. Chris Bell, I Am the Cosmos. And the other one that Matthew turned me on to, and again I would never have sought this out had he not mentioned it, is the album All Shook Up by Cheap Trick, which is the first Cheap Trick album I have ever owned or listened to, really. But it's produced by George Martin. It was released in 1980. It was their fifth album. It was their fifth studio album and their sixth release overall. And yeah, it was produced by George Martin, which I thought was quite good fun. But it doesn't really sound like the Beatles, really. It's kind of power pop. It's quite bombastic, you know, it's quite kind of full on. But certainly a really, really good fun album. Like I said before, that I would never have checked out had it not been for Matthew's recommendation. So thank you, Matthew. That is Cheap Trick and All Shook Up. Jeff Party, who always talks about great music all the time. I've got a John Prine album there which he recommended, which I haven't got around to listening to yet. But the record that Jeff raved about was this one, Wilco, Summer Teeth, the third album by the American alternative rock band from 1999. This is a fantastic record. Apparently it was written in the throes of Jeff Tweedy had broken up from his wife or his girlfriend, and he wanted to write some more personal songs. It's very melodic. It's very Beatlesy, actually, I think. You know, there's mellotron in there. His vocals sort of remind me of John Lennon, White Album. It's quite lysergic, you know, in places. Wilco are not a band that I've ever particularly checked out before. I have heard their stuff, but I've never sat and listened to an album. So that was interesting for me. Really good recommendation. I know they've done a lot of albums. We'll have to see how much shelf room I have. But I've certainly been enjoying that one, courtesy of Jeff. Check out Jeff Party if you haven't done already. Amazing channel. He's on a slight sabbatical at the moment over the summer, but I'm sure he'll be making a comeback in due course. And that was his recommendation, Summer Teeth by Wilco. And the final one I want to talk about today, really quickly, is this one, courtesy of Headley, another fat bearded man talking about records. This is the Dodgy album from 1993. Kind of a Britpop band. Dodgy are most famous for their track If It's Good Enough For You, which I always found to be quite annoying back in the day. I must admit I never really liked it. But Headley raved about this record. He said it was one of his most favourite albums ever. You know, it was kind of one of those recommendations, and I'm a sucker for that. If anybody ever says, you know, this is one of my favourite albums ever, I'll be buying it even before the breath has left their mouth, you know. and I loaded it onto the iPod, and it is a tremendous record. Once again, quite Beatlesy, very catchy, great choruses, really good atmosphere. A nice record for listening to on a summer's day when you're out walking the dog, which is what I do, in fact. So check that out, the Dodgy album. Not a band that gets a great deal of love in the VC, but thanks to Headley, they're getting a little bit more. And check out Headley if you haven't done already. Another fat bearded man talking about records. Great channel, shows a lot of country music, a lot of really interesting things, you know. Okay, so that's all the music that I want to talk about. So just before I go, let me just quickly give you a rundown on a couple of other channels, or a few other channels that I haven't mentioned yet. I've mentioned Mitch Wood. Check out Dean, quite new to the VC. His channel is called Grandma's Handbag. He makes really funny videos. Well, not funny videos, he just makes really good videos. Very personable guy. He kind of sits in his room, shows you around his room. He's very friendly. You know, his videos give out a great deal of warmth. He shows some really good things. He comments on videos. He interacts. Just a really good channel. That's Grandma's Handbag. It's called that because, well, actually, if you go and watch his introductory video, I'm sure he can explain it better than me. But it's, you know, it's kind of quirky. It's interesting. It's different. That's Grandma's Handbag, Dean. Tommy Burton is quite new to the VC. Tommy just does really good commentary on records, and what I like about his channel is that he's always right. You know, everything he says, he's yet to say anything which I think, oh, you know, I'm not sure about that. You know, in my book, you know, if what you say is right, it means you agree with me, and Tommy always agrees with me, therefore he's right. So yes, check him out, Tommy Burton. Merely Chris, who I have mentioned before in the context of a VCLT video, but check out Merely Chris if you haven't already. British guy from Newcastle, very into progressive rock, a bit of heavy stuff, but he likes classical as well. I think his favourite band of all time is Crowded House, so really nice mixture of stuff there. Chris is a lovely guy. We're on Facebook together now, and yeah, he shows some great stuff as well. And finally, I just want to mention Jonathan, Cheap and Cheerful Record Collector. Jonathan, again, is just a really, really nice fellow. He shows some great things. I like the idea of his channel, you know, Cheap and Cheerful. I respond well to those channels, you know, I respond better to those channels often than the people who are kind of, you know, showing very expensive things, you know, records that are impossible to find. I like that concept of Cheap and Cheerful, and Jonathan does it really well. I know Brian is very supportive of him too. I think they live a few streets apart, and I think they had a meet-up a while ago. That's Brian Shamrocking Records. So check out Jonathan as well, Cheap and Cheerful Record Collector. Okay, folks, so I'm going to have a little break from the VC now. We're just about to hit August. In fact, if I've uploaded this video a bit later than I intended, then we may already be into August, but I've done a lot of videos in the last couple of months. Need to take some time off. I'll probably still keep watching videos and commenting, but I fancy just taking a little break from a while, having a few weeks with the family, having a holiday, and coming back refreshed as we sort of inch further towards the autumn. So that's goodbye from me for the meantime. I'll see you all very soon. Keep spinning that vinyl. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.